guys, Isabella Greene here. This is going to be part 2 of the story of my trip to Egyptian desert. If you haven't heard the first part, please go ahead and check out my YouTube channel, and I will also put the link to it in the comments here. But I wanted to touch up on a few things that I mentioned in that first video. It's a long story. There's so much happened during that trip to Egyptian desert. So a few things that I wanted to share, a few more things that I wanted to share with you. First of all, about the Bedouins and the people of that land. Yes, we're all told that there are awful, evil Arabs that would kidnap you, kill you, and torture you, and do all kinds of awful things. I couldn't even tell my parents that I went because they were freaking out. And afterwards, I wanted to go again, but my mom said that if I go, she's gonna, have a heart attack and she can't handle it. So what I experienced was this. These were the most peaceful, centered, earthly people I've ever seen. They're laid back, they're cool, calm, and so connected to the elements. It's incredible. There was not a trace of any evil in these people. They're simple people, but there is none of that evilness that we hear about, about the people of the desert in the Middle East. They gave me, I had a few young guys, or like teenage guys, catering to me. They would come every day and bring food or make food for me, and also bring me water. I would watch them from a distance. I would watch them from, I'd be laying down in the sand dune and watch how they would show up. They would come in and there's nothing but sand around. And I watched that boy. He got on his knees. He prayed to his God, and then he got up and he started walking around. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at bumps of the sand. And then he would stick his hand in there and pull out a bunch of stuff like roots that I had no idea that there were roots or any type of wood inside those piles of sand. It's just sand everywhere. To me, the European mind, all I'm seeing is just sand. He was able to collect every single day. He was able to collect enough stuff to make a fire for me that would last a long time, that would last enough to cook food. And they would come in and bring a bucket with water with live fish in it from the Red Sea, and he would scale that fish right there with this rusted piece of old rusted knife, and put it straight on a piece of metal, like a sheet of metal that's all black from fire on one side, and on the other side, whatever. It's you're in the desert, you eat whatever. It's really clean. Everything is really pure and clean there. As a matter of fact, I was the strongest smelling object in the desert, because for first couple of days, until my body purified itself, because I was coming from the city. And so when my guide originally said that to me, he said, hey, you're gonna really notice the smell. He said the tourists smell incredibly strong in the desert because of all the toxins in the system. And then afterwards he said your sweat doesn't even smell anymore because of how pure the water and the air and the space in the desert is. And I did experience that, and trust me, I see that a lot of that now in living in Sedona too. But so the kid would scale a fish or make bread on the same piece of sheet of metal, the same sheet of metal. He would literally just have flour and water, roll it together, roll it on that sheet of metal, place it on the fire that he just made out of nothing, and make that bread. And then he would cook, and he would put rice on the bottom sometimes, bring a pot, not really pot, I don't know, it was just something, place the rice on the bottom, put it on the fire, put the fish on top. Sometimes he'll do that. And that was incredible. The food was delicious. There was no spices and no no salt, no pepper, nothing. It was just pure food and fire. You know, pure fish, pure rice, pure bread, and fire taste. And that was the most incredibly delicious, pure, clean, handmade food. Unbelievable. He also made tea for me. Brought a little like rusty, not rusty, but like a little like blackened piece, like a kettle kind of thing. Would like put it right on top of that fire, and then make tea and leave all that for me, and get out. And they also brought me water, and they brought me kind of like, I guess, a dirtier kind of like a little murky water, and they would put it outside in the sun for it to warm up so I could wash myself. A bunch of bottles with that kind of water, and then they brought drinking water too, from the store, you know, like bottled water, and leave it for me. And then so they would come in once a day, do all this, and leave. And I would come down back to that 3 sticks and the camel skin, the tent, and eat, and bathe. I would wait until the water to warm up, and in the afternoon, because first thing when you wake up in the desert, first of all, your body synchronizes immediately with that schedule, you know, because at least that's what my body did. And I was super night person, you know. I would always said, hey, you know, I want to see the sunrise only if I'm just seeing it before I go to sleep. That was my thing back then. But there I would wake up with the sunrise. By the sunrise, I imagine, was about 5 in the morning or something like that, because I didn't have the watch to tell. But about 3 hours later, it was so hot that you had to do what the Bedouins need to know best. The Bedouins need to know best, like how to do nothing between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. That's what my friend told me, so, or the guide told me. So I would find, you would watch the shade just disappear, you know. There were like little rock formations, like I mentioned, little sandstone formations, and the shade would just disappear, you know. It would be like this much shade. Literally, if you're laying on the side of your body with your back like pressed against the rock, then your knees are still like sticking out already, you know. But so that's what I did most of the day when the sun would get so hot. They gave me those Bedouin white scarves or whatever you call it, and they taught me how to wrap it like that so that only my eyes were showing. And it's an incredible protection, not only from the sun, because it's breathable. They make it there in the villages, in the desert. It's handmade and it's breathable, but it's also a great protection from flies. Flies weren't only bothering me. Flies would only show up when there was food. You know, as soon as I would walk away, there were no flies. But if I had to, you know, cover myself from flies around food, that's what I used. That, and also from the sun. It gives you a nice shade kind of from the sun, so you're not baked, because there's nowhere to hide. It's just like open space in the sun. And then around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would go and bathe with the bottled water. And I found a spot that I really enjoyed. It was down the sand dune into kind of like a little, like a lagoon kind of thing. Lagoon is probably not the right word, but like down the sand dune against some rock formations. And I was like, oh, I want to go there. That looks so nice and private. And you know, if any of the Bedouin kids are gonna drive by, which, you know, no one lived there, so no one was going. But of course, you know, the mind is like, you need to hide. So I went down there, and the first time as I'm walking down there, there's a snake, and the snake was laying on one of the rock formations, and it kind of raised itself a little bit to like look at me, like raised that head and look at me. And I stopped, and I'm just standing there looking at that snake. But that time, I think it was the 3rd day probably, I was so at peace already. I just looked at that snake like, you know, a part of everything else. I was feeling like being a part of everything else. Like I'm made out of that sand. I'm made out of the same stuff as the snake. I'm made out of the same stuff as the stars in the sky around me in the desert, and we're in such sync. We're so synchronized that that's just the element of me, that snake, you know. And so she kind of like looked at me, and then she crawled down, and she like shimmered like this, you know, shimmered under one of those rocks. And I said, okay. So I went down there anyway, and I bathed. And the next day I came, and the snake was in the same spot, and it didn't even move. It just like was still there, you know. I was doing my thing, almost like close enough to it. It just laid there, didn't even move. Were there scorpions? Yeah, I saw scorpions. There were like this strange creatures, like lizard, like a large lizards that walk around, have legs, like the dragon type of lizards, pretty big ones. Didn't bother me at all. Nothing bothered me. Nothing came near me. They would just look at you, acknowledge you, and go about their own business. And same with the people of the desert. I think the people of the desert are very, very much within that same consciousness, you know, of oneness, of shared space, of being fully plugged into the space of earth, you know, and the elements, and knowing about the elements, and getting up at sunrise, getting down when the sun is down, and just with the flow of the earth. The beauty of that space is incredible, incredible. So yeah, needless to say, I am a big fan of the desert, and that was an incredible experience for me. I'm sure. Oh, another story I wanted to tell really quickly was about the ravens. So the ravens came. The ravens are super smart birds, and the ravens came at some point to play with me. And after that, they came every day to play with me. And probably they were checking out if I'm dead yet, you know, if they can eat me or not. But the ravens were huge, and they would circle over my head. And I would, if I'm laying there on the sand dune, and they would just start circling over me, I would sit up, you know, and be like, hey, you know what? I'm alive. It's all right. But they would come really low over my head, and they were doing flips, and I could see how they would just look at me, you know. They would tilt their head and like look at me, and they would fold their wings and do flips in the air. As one is doing that, the other one is circling, and they're like laughing. I could tell that they were like laughing with each other. Then they would like fly over. There were a couple of ravens, so they would like fly over and sit on the rock formations. And I would be, do some more of that. I want to see more of that. That was so much fun. And then the one would take over off and like fly over my head, and then fold the wings and do it. Like literally they flip in the air like that with their legs like all the way, like do 360 like that, and then open the wings. And as they're doing that, they start falling, and then they open their wings and like lift up again. And that was such a fun game. I was laughing so hard about that. And yeah, the footprints, you can hear the footprints of the ants. I saw a lot of other visions. I saw a lot of other spirits. I was able to find my own peace inside. I was able to get guidance, like I mentioned before, as far as what I'm doing here. And I also achieved that space, or received that knowledge of the feeling that is unforgettable, that's with me since, you know, that everything always makes sense. All right, guys, part 2 is a little shorter. Again, if you like this, listen to part 1. It's got more juicy stuff in it. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I share all kinds of stories here, all kinds of different subjects. And if you'd like to have a session with me, you can reach me at isabellagreene.com. I love you. Take care. Namaste.